My name is Jeff Robertson. I'm a member of the RASC, Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, Edmonton Centre. And this is What's Up Over Edmonton for the month of January 2022. We call it What's Up Over Edmonton because our skies here at 53 degrees north latitude are quite a bit different than, say, the skies in over Toronto or the central United States, which a lot of the astronomy publications and star maps are drawn to accommodate. For example, this is the sky over Toronto at 11 o'clock on July the 5th. And I always point out this constellation here is Scorpio, the Scorpion. In Toronto, you can see the whole thing. In Edmonton, this is as much as of Scorpio as you'll ever see. The bulk of it is below the horizon. Likewise, on these star finders that we pass out when our observatory reopens again sometime in the future, it's geared for a Southern Ontario audience, and we point that out to people that we hand these out to. And it's not just Toronto. This is the Sky Dome from the November Astronomy magazine, and although Ursa Major is a prominent constellation in our sky, this sky dome is drawn for 35 degrees north latitude, and well, that's one of the stars of Ursa Major. The rest of it is below the horizon. Most of the information I use comes out of the Observer's Handbook. It's 352 pages of all sorts of information that the observer and amateur astronomer can use throughout the year. The new handbook, which received just before Christmas, has 6 new content sections and 3 sections with significant revisions. The sky in January, cold nights and bright stars, and boy, has it ever been cold lately. Sunrise for tomorrow is at 8:48 in the morning. Sunset is at 4:31. We've already picked up 15 minutes since the solstice when the sun set at 4:16. So the evenings sunsets are getting a little later on. By the end of the month, sunrise is at 8:20. And sunset is at 5:15 on January 31st. So Venus is leaving the evening sky right now. Well, if it wasn't so cloudy out, well, it would have set by now. But around sunset, you would have seen it very, very low in the southwest sky. Saturn sets shortly before dusk. It actually sets before the sky gets completely dark. Mercury is visible low in the southwest early in the month, and Jupiter is preparing to leave the evening sky. And Mars is very, very low in the southeast just before dawn. So I'll start the planetarium portion as before. I've pre-recorded this. So here we go. I'm going to start very briefly on January 6th, tomorrow, and the time is set at 5:15, so about 45 minutes after the sun set. And we can see a lineup of planets. Mercury, very low to the horizon, all in the southwest. Saturn, just behind it. Jupiter, the Moon, Neptune, and then over in the southeast with telescope, likewise for Neptune. You'll need a telescope for Neptune also. Uranus and Ceres, the largest of the asteroids or dwarf planets. You'll notice that Venus has not visible. It is below the horizon at this time. You may be able to catch it just after sunset. As I say, sunset's around 4:30. So you may catch it very, very low on the horizon at say, 4:45 or so. But it is heading for inferior conjunction. That is when it is um, between the Earth and the Sun from our point of view, and then it'll move into the evening sky, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. By the time we have a truly dark sky, astronomical twilight has ended, and in this case on January 6th it's at 6:41. Saturn is already set, so we're left with the bright Jupiter and the telescopic object Neptune, or a good pair of binoculars steadily held, and the moon making a little triangle here. And then further up we have Uranus and Ceres, and we have all the winter constellations are coming up very nicely. A little bit later in the evening, once Canis Major rises, we will have the winter circle or the winter hexagon all above the horizon. And by 9 o'clock, we do have the winter circle or winter horizon, starting with Capella down to Aldebaran, Rigel, Sirius, I should say, Procyon, and Pollux, making a nice hexagon or circle. Bright stars in the winter sky, and you'll notice that over here Neptune is getting ready to set, the moon is right on the horizon, and Jupiter is already set. It's set about half an hour ago, and this is all for January 6th, tomorrow. Going to the middle of the month at 8 o'clock, we see an almost full moon approaching Gemini. And if we swing over into the northern sky, we see our old friend Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, is starting its climb up into the sky again. It was very, very low on the horizon at this time of night a few months ago, but it is started to climb up, and by springtime it'll be fairly high up in the sky. Of course, we have our summer, two of our stars from the summer triangle here, low on the horizon, and as I've mentioned before, they park themselves low on the northern horizon, starting in the northwest and then moving across through the months to the northeast, and then they start to climb again, where they will be very prominent in the late summer and early fall. Our friend Pegasus, the upside down flying horse, is fairly low to the horizon now. A few months ago it was almost straight overhead. And by the end of the month, and this is just before 7 o'clock, Jupiter is just about ready to set. The sky is not yet completely dark. If I change the time to 7:30 when we have truly dark skies, Jupiter has set. So we have been watching Jupiter for the last few months, but its time in the evening sky is over. It will pass behind the sun from our point of view, and then will reemerge into the morning sky, and we will catch up with it again in warmer months. Before we go into the morning sky, I'll just point out that Venus is, as I mentioned before, in conjunction with the sun. It is between us and the sun. It's this time in its orbit, it's passing over the sun by about 5 degrees. Here, I'll just get rid of the glare here. You can see. There we go. Venus carrying on in its orbit, and it will be moving into the morning sky, and we'll talk about that here right away. If we switch to the morning sky on here, I've set the time for 6:45 on the 6th, tomorrow, and we can see Gemini is about ready to set, but we also see our familiar spring constellations, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and even some of the summer constellations are starting to make their appearance, Libra, and you can just see the head of Scorpio starting to pop over the horizon. At this early hour, we do not see any planets. If we advance an hour just before sunup, Mars is very low in the southeast sky tomorrow morning. If I change the time to 7:30, that's just to give us enough of a break at the end of the month between, so the sky is still kind of dark before sunrise. But if we advance through the days, I could see Mars doesn't really get very high up in the sky in January, but by the middle of the month, we see Venus starting to climb up, and by the end of the month, it would be easily visible in the southeast sky just before sunup. I'll just make a note that Mercury does make an appearance very, very, very low on in the southeast at the end of the month, but you will need exceptionally clear skies and a very flat horizon to see it. Note how low the ecliptic is now. This is kind of what the ecliptic was doing in the fall, very low in the evening sky, and as you can see in the evening sky now, the ecliptic is quite high, and it will actually get higher as we get into spring. So that's about it for the planetarium portion. Okay, before I go on, are there any questions, or Alistair, do you have anything to add?
No, that's, one neat little thing, as Mars is close to Antares, the name Antares means opposite of Mars or rival of Mars, as in antagonist, and Ares being the Roman god of, or is it Greek? I always get them mixed up, of war. So Antares is the rival of Mars, and they will both be that nice orange.
Ah, yeah, that's right. It's a good one. I should have thought of that, but I didn't. So unfortunately, I missed. I missed January's meteor shower, which is on the 2nd, but it was cloudy here anyway. So, yeah. All right, moving along.
What do you see when you look at the moon? When it's full and round, do you see a balloon? Does it look like a cookie with the bite taken out? What do you see when you look at the moon?
Okay, the moon was new on January the 2nd, just a few days ago. First quarter will be on January the 9th. The moon is full on the 17th, and it is popularly known as the wolf moon. It also has a few other names in different places. The moon after Yule, the old moon, the ice moon, and the snow moon, the last two being very appropriate considering the weather we've had around here. And last quarter is on the 25th. The lunar features I take from either the Observe the Moon Certificate binocular or telescope program that the RASC has. This one I'm going to use today is from both the binocular and the telescope certificate program because it's a fairly large feature. So today we're going to talk about Mare Crisium, or the Sea of Crisis. And continuing my reputation as one of the world's worst astrophotographers, this is a picture of the moon I took a while back. And there is Mare Crisium right there. And that's just a blow up of the that same picture. Mare Crisium, or the Sea of Crisis, is one of the smaller of the lunar maria on the near side, and it is visible starting about 3 days after new moon, easily seen in binoculars or, of course, a small telescope. And it lies east of the more famous Sea of Tranquility. It's about 4 billion years old, so it predates the Imbrium impact. It is an impact feature. Something really big hit the moon early in its life, and it measures about 450 by 556 kilometers with a fairly flat floor. Its dark color, like all the maria, is from basalt. It's hardened from hot magma that were produced by its initial impact. It does contain some notable craters. Actually, we talked about them several months ago. This guy here, Pierce, and this guy here, which is Picard, because I couldn't pass up a Star Trek reference. And this is a picture taken by someone who is much better at photography than I am. There's Pierce and Picard there. This is a view from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, looking straight down. It has been explored by unmanned craft. Luna 15, for those of you who are old enough to remember, during the flight of Apollo 11, the Soviet Union launched a Luna 15, and the idea was to land on the moon, scoop up a piece of the moon, some lunar samples, and then get them back to Earth before Apollo 11, therefore demonstrating the Soviet Union's approach to lunar exploration, which was, we were never intending to send a man. We send machines for much less money and less risk. Of course, they did have a lunar program, but it didn't work out very well. Anyway, Luna 15 crashed just before Apollo 11 made its landing. But in 1976, Luna 24 did land in the Sea of Crisis and did return some samples. The moon has a very lumpy gravity field due to mass concentrations, or mascons, located below the surface. These were found during the Lunar Orbiter program that NASA used to map the moon prior to map out the Apollo landing sites, where they noticed that the orbits of these craft would be disrupted by these mascons. And then later on, the Grail mission did map the gravity field of the moon. And this is one of the maps of the Sea of Crisis. Right at the bottom on the floor, under the floor of the Sea of Crisis, is a rather large mass, and it's probably the remains of the original impactor. So that's Mare Crisium, or the Sea of Crisis. Constellation I picked today was Taurus, the bull, because it's quite prominent in the winter sky right now. So this is Taurus the bull here. If you can't see the bull, well, here's the astronomical drawing. And if you still can't see the bull, there it is, fairly long horns. There's its face. And you just see the top part of the bull, and it's actually floating in water or swimming, which will go to the legend, which I'll get to in a minute here. And we're going to talk about three features that are contained within this constellation. The first one is this one, the Hyades star cluster, and the Pleiades star cluster, or the Seven Sisters, also known as M45. And finally, the Crab Nebula, or M1, or Messier 1. You will note that Orion is right below Taurus. And in the city, it's kind of tough to catch the Pleiades sometimes because of the city lights, especially in the winter with it shining with the bright snow reflecting. But to find the Pleiades, you just find Orion's belt, which is easy to find, and just draw a line, and it'll take you right through the Pleiades, right to the Pleiades. It'll actually pass right through the Hyades, past the bright star Aldebaran. There is a couple legends about Taurus, and they both involved Zeus, who is a bit of a randy fellow. Seems any time I have a constellation legend involving Zeus, he's kind of fooling around. Anyway, Zeus changed himself into a beautiful white bull to win the affections of the Phoenician princess Europa. Europa hopped upon the bull's back, and the bull swam across the Mediterranean Sea, taking Europa all the way to the island of Crete. And so that's why the bull is depicted swimming in the classical drawing of the constellation. And also there's another one where Zeus hides Io, another girlfriend, from his wife Hera by changing her into the form of a bull and putting her up in the sky. So anyway, so let's talk about the three features here. So the first one is the Hyades, and it's a V-shaped figure. It's an open star cluster. It's the nearest open cluster to Earth, and it's only about 153 light years away. The brightest stars do form this V, although the brightest star in view, Aldebaran, is actually not part of the cluster. It's actually much closer to Earth than the rest of the stars in the Hyades. It's only 65 light years away. Through binoculars, you can see dozens and dozens of stars in the Hyades, and through a telescope you can see hundreds. There's actually hundreds of stars in the Hyades, and astronomers have mapped the Hyades, and they say it's slightly spherical in shape. They're about the stars in the cluster are about 650 million years old, and they share a common motion through space. And then there's another view of the Hyades here. There's Aldebaran kind of overtaking everything. And also we see the Pleiades, which we'll get to next. And the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters, or M45, or if you're Japanese, Subaru, which is, if you look at the grill of a Subaru, you will see a pattern depicting the Pleiades. It's another open cluster like the Hyades. It's very young. It's younger than the Hyades. It's only about 100 million years old, and it's about 400 light years away. And it has a lot, as you can see from the picture, a lot of hot blue-white stars. Naked eye, you can make out 6 of them. in binoculars, you can see dozens of stars. And in a medium telescope, you could see hundreds of stars within the Pleiades. In Greek mythology, the Hyades were 5 daughters of Atlas and half sisters to the Pleiades. So Atlas got around too, I guess. And after the death of their brother Hyas, the weeping sisters were transformed into a cluster of stars that were afterwards associated with rain. And as far as the Pleiades go, they were also daughters of Atlas. And after Atlas was forced to carry the heavens on his shoulders, Orion, which we saw earlier in the star map, began to pursue all the Pleiades, and Zeus transformed them first into doves and then into stars to comfort their father. And the constellation Orion is said to still pursue them across the night sky. So, interesting story. Maybe Michael Bay will make a movie about it, who knows. And there is another view of the Pleiades with the brighter stars named. The last feature is the Crab Nebula, or M1, and it is a supernova remnant from a supernova observed on Earth in the year 1054. And this guest star, as it was called, was recorded by astronomers in China and the Islamic world, and it is on a rock painting in the Americas that the first people saw and recorded on a rock painting. And curiously, there doesn't appear to be any known records in Europe. So I don't know if it was cloudy for a long, long time, or they just, their beliefs that the skies were unchanging scared them, and nobody wrote it down, or if they did write it down, the records were lost or destroyed, who knows. Anyway, the supernova was bright enough to be seen in the daytime. Crab Nebula is about 6,500 light years away, but you need a good telescope and a dark sight to see it. It's quite small. It's 6x4 arc minutes across, and by a comparison, a full moon is 30 arc minutes across. And it's located a degree above Zeta Tauri, the tip of the bull's lower horn. And it's illuminated by a bright pulsar, which is a fast-turning neutron star, which are the remains of the original star that went supernova, and it spins with a 33 millisecond pulse rate. As I said, it's not very big, so looking at it through a telescope, it's going to look quite small, and probably not any color to it. It'll look gray, maybe a hint of green, but it is a fascinating object. And one thing about the Crab Nebula, that even though the supernova exploded almost 1,000 years ago, it's still expanding. And we know this by comparing pictures taken 60 years apart. And this is a little video showing that the remnants of the star that blew up are still expanding away. So, other highlights for the month. It's not that many. So, as I mentioned before, Venus is an inferior conjunction on the 9th, and we'll move into the morning sky later on in the month. The lunar X is one of my favorite lunar features. It's visible for about 4 hours starting around 7:30 on January the 9th. And last year, we got a lunar X about every 2 months here. This year, they're few and far between in our neck of the woods. Either that little 4-hour window where you can see it is before the moon comes up, or after the moon is set. So there's not very many Lunar X sighting opportunities this year from Edmonton. And the full moon on the 17th is going to be the smallest of the year, so you won't hear anything about supermoons or micromoons, or, well, you won't hear anything about micromoons because that's not as exciting as a supermoon. So maybe it's a Clark Kent moon, I don't know. Also, it's Robbie Burns Day on the 25th, so pour yourself a glass of scotch. Hey, this is the space history part, and as I mentioned before, I pick an event whose anniversary date is divisible by 5. So in 2022, it is a year that ends in 2 or 7. So we're going to talk about Mars, the god of war, which has spawned dozens of B movies about invaders, monsters. Why are they always invading Earth? I don't know. Maybe they're looking for love. Yeah, Yvonne Craig, that girl. She was also on Star Trek. And to start the original war on Christmas, when aliens attacked the North Pole. For the age of spacecraft, our best view of Mars were these taken with photographic plates. You could see light and dark features, not the features that we now know are there. Some, like Percival Lowell, who studied Mars quite a bit, thought he could see canals and drew elaborate maps of the surface, but most observers never saw these canals, and they never showed up in photographs. And one thing I learned years ago is that even though we would draw these maps with canals running all over the surface of the planet, he never actually saw the whole planet covered in canals. He would only see a canal for a little bit, and he'd draw it in, and then he'd see one somewhere else and draw it in. He'd never see it with canals running all over the place. So our first close-up view of Mars was when Mariner 4, the NASA probe, flew by in 1965 and took 23 very grainy photos that showed a surface not unlike the moon. In 1969, Mariner 6 and 7 flew by and took better photos, but it still showed a moon-like surface. It should be noted that Mariners 4, 6, and 7 all flew past the southern part of the planet. They all covered the same area. So I guess it's no surprise that they all saw pretty much the same thing. Now, Mariner 7 did manage to take the first color picture of Mars as it was approaching. Its first color picture looked very similar to the pictures we could see on Earth with a photographic plate. So Mars looked really uninteresting. It looked dead as the moon. And the Martian Chamber of Commerce was not very impressed with this. They thought they deserved better. So Mariner 9, and there it is there in testing, and its sister craft Mariner 8 were designed to orbit Mars and get a global view of the planet. Mariner 8 had a launch failure, and the only thing it explored was the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Mariner 9 was launched on May the 30th, 1971. There it is going up on an Atlas Centaur booster. And there's a color picture of Mariner 9. And it took 167 days to get to Mars. And as it approached in November of 1971,
I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues.
all it saw
I just blowed
was,
in and I
well, pretty
got
much
them
nothing
Dust
except
Bowl
for
blues.
3
I just
black
blowed in
marks here and
and I'll
another
blow
one
back
over
out
here.
again.
The planet was
I guess you've heard
engulfed in
about every kind of blues.
a
I
global
guess
dust
you've
storm,
heard about every
which is
kind
not
of blues.
uncommon. We had one
But when the
in
dust gets
2018
high,
when
you can't even
when
see
the Earth,
sky.
when Mars was very close to the Earth, and looking at it through my telescope or
I've
anybody's,
seen
all
the
you could
dust
see.
so black that I couldn't
I'll just
see
wait for
a
Woody
thing.
Guthrie to finish here.
I seen the dust so black that I couldn't see a thing, and the wind so cold, boy, it nearly cut your water off. I seen the wind so high that it blowed my
Okay,
fences down.
all right. I thought Woody Guthrie's was appropriate, singing about the Dust Bowl. Anyway, this global dust storm just covered all the features on Mars. Like I say, all you could see were these 3 black spots, and then another one over here, and a little bit of the south polar cap. And this is another picture taken well after the craft went into orbit. So for a couple months, Mariner 9 didn't really have anything to do as far as imaging Mars, but it did have a opportunity to image its Mars moon Phobos, which looks like a big potato. This all ended in January 1972, 50 years ago this month, when the air cleaned and sunny days. And all of a sudden, those black marks turned out to be volcanoes sticking up above the dust. 3 fairly large ones, and then 1 huge one, Olympus Mons. Olympus Mons, there's a color view Mariner 9 took, sticking up above, I guess, the dust as it was clearing. Turned out to be not only the largest volcano, but it's the largest mountain in the solar system. It's 2.5 times the height of Mount Everest. It's 22 kilometers high, and it's 600 kilometers across. It's just massive, massive volcano. And there's a view looking straight down at it. If volcanoes weren't enough, it also found a massive canyon that stretched 4,000 kilometers across the surface, like a giant rip in the surface of Mars. And in some points, it's 10 kilometers deep. The Grand Canyon, which is the largest canyon on Earth, would fit into one of these tributaries quite easily. And just to give it a bit of scale, here's a map with various features mapped out, given names. And just to give it some context, just how big this thing is, there's a diagram of the United States to scale laid out with this massive canyon starting on the East Coast and going almost all the way to California. And then you can see those 3 shield volcanoes there. Mariner 9 took more than 7,000 photos and measured the density and composition of the Martian atmosphere and its clouds, took temperature readings, made altimeter readings of the height and depth of features, measured air pressure, surface temperature, air temperature, and really showed a true picture of the planet. And it was not a dead planet at all. So some of the things it found was that its polar caps were just not all a big flat hunk of ice. It was, they were terraced and made up of frozen CO2 or dry ice and water. There were features that looked like dry riverbeds, hinting that water once flowed on Mars. Of course, there were impact craters, seen first by Mariners 4, 6, and 7, both small and large. And some of the large craters hinted that they may have transformed into lakes. And you can see a bit of, looks like where flowing water might have gone through these craters here. There were also features shaped by erosion of wind and water. And there were also these vast sand dunes, huge dune fields. And one thing they noticed that the dune fields all seem to indicate that the winds always came from the same direction on Mars, which is not like the Earth where the wind tends to shift, but the directionality of the way the dunes were formed suggests a prevailing wind always coming from the same directions. And well, speaking of the dunes and winds and shifting sands, Mariner 9 showed that Mars wasn't a dead world like the moon at all. And its features were still active today. I don't think I could explain it well, so I'll have this. I brought in an expert here. Oh.
The exciting thing that we discovered, there were many of them, but one very exciting thing that we observed in the middle of the mission was that things were changing before our very eyes on the Martian surface. For example, in 13 days, an area about 7 miles across discontinuously appeared, just hadn't been there before, suddenly it was there. Now that kind of change had been observed, but from the Earth and on a larger scale, for 100 years. It was called seasonal changes, and the early observers imagined that there was plant life on Mars, and that in local spring and summer the plants grew. They darkened the landscape and heightened the coloration of the landscape. Well, we proposed before Mariner 9, my colleagues and I, that instead what was happening was that there were high winds that were uncovering the dark material, dark rocky stuff, by blowing off bright, fine particles. And the changes that we've seen on Mars happen during the course of the mission are consistent with this kind of idea. So it looks as if the seasonal changes of Mars are not due to biology, but due to weather.
So the view from Mars went from world more of illusion and wishful thinking to one that was a collage of light and dark features, to a really, really diverse planet calling out for further study. And this is a mosaic of pictures taken by Mariner 9. As the pictures came back, they would print them out, and they had a big globe at JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they would put these pictures on this globe and make a photo globe of Mars. And this is a picture of that globe. Contact with Mariner 9 was lost on October 27th, 1972, when it ran out of fuel for its fine thrusters used to point its antenna at Earth. And at the time, the controllers estimated its orbit would take about 50 years to decay. So maybe it's still in orbit, maybe not. But Mariner 9 certainly showed us that Mars was a far more interesting place than what we first imagined. So with that, I always mention Heavens Above. It's a great source of astronomy information, sky maps, satellite timings, comets if there are any in the vicinity, etc. Our next What's Up is on February the 2nd. Our next meeting of Edmonton RASC is on Monday, this Monday, January the 10th. And Alistair will be doing his introduction to stargazing on Wednesday, January 26th. Invite you all to check these out. And with that, I'll say thank you. Again, my apologies for all the technical issues. I will see if I can get those ironed out. I do have a new computer. See if I can get it sorted out for next month so we don't have a repeat. So I'll say thank you. And is there any questions?
That was a very young Carl Sagan. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no questions, comments, I will say thank you very much for joining me tonight. And look forward to seeing you guys again. And like I say, don't forget about Alistair on and also our regular meeting on Monday. So I will say good night and thank you.